If I see a Confederate flag on someone's hat, something's going to happen, and I don't know if I'm going to think about it first or if my body's going to do it first. So to tell someone to get over it, it's not something that's in your head, it's in your body. It's like, are you crazy? And there's certain rage that we allow, and we know whose rage we will allow. I'll hear your pain. I'm good, but you got to hear other people's pain too.
This is United States of Race. Personal stories of how our earliest memories determine a lifetime of relationships. Each episode features one guest sharing their experiences with race. Keeping these episodes anonymous lets our guests share the real, uninhibited stories of their life. And it gives us the chance to listen without prejudice. Host, DB Crema. Today we're joined by Turk, who felt the sting of race starting at a young age. And with humor as her shield, it set her on a path to building inclusive workspaces for those who need it most. When did you start dealing with race?
I think my first memory is being on a school bus. I'd say probably around the ages of 7 or 8. And this little boy sat next to me, and he was, we're talking like kids were talking. And I just moved there because we moved back from a Arab emirate. He was talking, and then he got a little sad because he said he couldn't be. My dad said that he can't be friends with Black people. So, and I remember flipping my hand over and showing him that my palm was white. And so he smiled, and that to him, that was enough,
Right.
Of course, that was the beginning of my exposure to race. When I moved back from Manama, Bahrain to the States. Up until then, I was, living in a pretty multicultural atmosphere.
Interesting. I think about typical U.S. perspective is that the Middle East, the Emirates are, more homogenous.
Right. Well, yeah, military brat, of course. So being in the military definitely gives you a different aspect. But I'm sure most people, if they go to Manama, Bahrain, will feel like it's just only Arabs. I think I went to like a Department of Defense school. So you had contractors that were working there. So I may have been the only Black American, but I wasn't the only like Black or brown person. So you would have someone from India, had people from Japan. There were different shades that I were used to. So I just thought, God just made people in different shades.
Did you ever feel like there was any reaction to you?
It's hard to say because as you think of as an adult, was there a certain reaction to me because I was Black or because I was an American? The Arabs at the souk thought it was adorable that I could speak, Arabic and things like that. This little American kid. So I don't know if it was because I was a Black American kid or I was an American kid. So I think that has a lot to do with how I saw, race. So maybe people's first interaction with me wasn't based on my race, but based on my citizenship. But the United States was definitely a more Black, white. There wasn't that much gray area. So yeah.
So then you came back to the U.S., which has its own special brand of drawing distinctive lines along color and race.
We came back when we moved to Key West, Florida, and this had to be like in 82. It wasn't much there back then. My mother was worried about me because I was a shy kid, but there were just a few instances that, I quickly learned that this is a different atmosphere than Manama, Bahrain. And this is probably one of her first memories when they had to sit me down and talk to me. She was, talking to the teachers or teachers' helpers, and like, I'm worried about my daughter because, she's shy. We just moved here. But your kid, she's okay because I heard some little girl tell her that you're Black because God must have taken you out of the oven too late. And she goes, your daughter turned around without missing a beat and said, well, he must have taken you out too early. My dad was a very funny guy. So I think I use humor to, to cover up a lot. I used to sneak and watch the Jeffersons and Benny Hill. So maybe that was it. I don't know.
Picked up all the quick retorts.
Yeah. But that's definitely a story my mom always tells. She always thought that was hilarious. And she kind of felt better that I could take care of myself. I'll tell you another story, but it's not funny. It's kind of sad.
Okay.
So when we moved to Key West, and then we left Key West and we moved to Northern Florida. And my first year there, I had got like hit in the lunchroom at this school. And I told my mom about it. And I didn't think anything, thing was going to happen about it. And she actually called the police, and then a friend of mine that I had in the second grade was a witness for me. He was a little boy. He was like 8. And my mom said to me at that time, she was like, now this is nice that these people came to be your witness, but don't count on that. But don't count on that. Most times you're going to be the only person who's going to be able to speak up for yourself. So I think as a kid, that's kind of like, so you're telling me I shouldn't trust most people?
Yeah, that's heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of things that I know happen, but I block out. Like children telling you, get in the back of the line because your mom's black. Now, who you think told them that? 7 or 8-year-olds? Come on.
Right.
It has a lot to do how you're raised because I was 8 years old. I thought I would be a little bit more hip to race earlier.
Mm.
But yeah, man, there's a lot of stuff that happened in the great state of Florida. I still stick up for her. Um, when stuff happens now, I think I detach.
Mm.
I'm like, like right now, I'm like, it's kind of like when you're at a concert, make some noise. It's their turn to scream. I want to hear you. I'm in the bathroom during this set. You know what I'm saying? I'm outside smoking a cigarette. I'm not really into this band that's coming up. This ain't me.
Why? Because you're just like not into the like, let's use tribalism as a.
I mean, not even at Lilith Fair, people had their bands. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Even in the tribe, you can have what tribe, what part of the tribe you want to see or hang out with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably a defense mechanism,
Mm-hmm. Will you ever feel like talking about a defense mechanism, you ever feel like you have worked through those, talking about a defense mechanism, you ever feel like you have worked through the stuff you blocked out as a kid?
I don't know. I think so. If I take stuff from recent, say, being in quarantine, you know, um, lost my job earlier in the pandemic, corporate offices. So as you're out of that, you don't have to deal with that all the time. You don't have to deal with whatever you have to deal with when you deal with people who are different, no matter if it's race or whatnot. So being in isolation or being quarantined with people that you love and people that know you, when I see stuff like this, it's very easy for me to be like, F those people, because I'm not having to interact with them anymore. So it's a weird dichotomy to be in if this stuff happens and then you have to go to work and deal with people,
What's the stuff?
Well, like when racial violence happens, it's hard to go to work and deal with, people who just may not understand where you are. So you can't be there. You have to be where you are at that moment physically, which is at work. And everyone has to do this to some regard. So in some regard, I was so happy. I'm an introvert. So I hate to say this, but the pandemic, I'm like, I'm having the time of my life.
Hearing this all for all your life.
I can't stand people. This is awesome. Man. You do have to deal with people, but I was so happy I didn't have to deal with certain people, to explain how I'm feeling, or just to, I don't know, sometimes you just don't even want to be in that situation,
Yeah.
And work atmospheres and others. This all depends on if, and people hate this word, but is your workplace inclusive? Genuinely inclusive. Yeah. So it's been nice being quarantined because I don't have to deal with being in places that where maybe I can't fully be myself or be angry or be upset, myself or be angry or be upset,
I mean, being insulated, having some level of insulation does help to protect you from the triggers that are that make you upset.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what life's going to be like when I have to go back outside, I mean, what am I going to set up for since the pandemic started? What spaces do I want to spend the second half of my life in?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't think it's the ones I was in before. And that's probably a lot of people, whether it's about race, gender identity, sexuality. The capitalist will does not work for most of us. So just that whole space that's largely based on whiteness and patriarchy, it doesn't work for a lot of people. So what space do I want to be in? What do I want the second part of my life? What do I want that energy to be in? What do I want to worry about? You know,
And what does that look like to you? What are you thinking about? What are safe spaces and where you feel like you belong?
you know, as much as I just sat here and say that, I can't stand people, which is true. I think I'm adaptable to a lot of spaces, switching code, switching, of course, but I want to help people that need help. And that's people who are on the margins, people who are marginalized. Um, but it may be people who look like me who are also trans, you know. Um, I think because of the work I do, like with recruitment, because I'm a recruiter, um, I know that most workspaces aren't inclusive. So it's a bottom up thought to me. So if I can get a person into a job to where they can, feel good about themselves, go back home, be part of their community, and just live their day to day life, that's what I'm trying to do. But I'm
Right.
trying to do that working with people who maybe feel like they don't belong or who haven't gotten a shot. Um, and that goes through a lot of stuff: ageism, uh, the color of your skin. I mean, the color of your skin. I mean, there's so much discrimination in hiring.
Hmm.
Um, that I think just making sure people who aren't represented or feel included are included. Because then, if you make a place good enough to work for, say, someone who's at the bottom, then it's going to be a great place to work for the person at the top. Because the person at the top is not going to have a bad work experience if the person at the bottom is.
Also extends into other aspects of the life. If you're having a good environment at work, having a good experience at work, you're going home feeling more secure, less frustrated, less marginalized, through that one act of helping to create inclusive hiring and inclusive workspaces. That's huge.
Yeah, I think for me, helping people get to where they need to be in their life through employment.
Hmm.
Most people have to work. Most people don't want to. But if you're going to spend that time at work, you should be respected. You should not go home feeling horrible. And a lot of people go home feeling horrible.
Hmm. So tell me about inclusive workspaces. What does that look like? What do we need to get there?
Well, like I'm trying to figure out when you set up a staff, how do you set up for a sustainable, inclusive, and equitable culture? Do you start at the bottom tier? Do you start in the middle? Do you start, leaders that you choose? What spot do you put them in? Do you put them in the middle so they can serve as a representation, a diverse representation for the people that work under them, and then they can speak to people who are in the upper level, and eventually, hopefully, those people move up in the corporation? Or do
Hmm.
you start from the top down? Like what's the most important spot in a company um, to where people can get in and feel like this is a space for them and then prosper, where they move up or move on in their career. Great managers is huge.
Hmm.
Um, but starting at the top always helps. It always helps to know that people who are in the big offices don't all look the same,
Hmm.
don't also have the same background, don't come from the same class and go to the same, B school, that kind of thing. So, yeah, so that's something I'm trying to think about. Where do you start when you start up a company? Um, so when someone goes to interview or when someone's their first day, they're like, you know what? I think, I like it here, and I really think I could be myself here, and everyone seems respectful, and that's the culture of respect. We may not all get along, but I see my manager don't take no slack when it comes to respect.
Right.
You
You
know,
can see it's like going in, interviewing in a space, you say, I can see myself.
I can think that I felt like I could bring all of myself were nonprofit
Really?
places, so human services.
Mm.
And I'm really trying to think of a corporation that I worked for. But in terms of dressing the way I want to dress, I mean, when I was working in the nonprofit world, working in the nonprofit world, we had to dress up because we had, clients we were trying to teach the importance of dressing for success.
Right.
So and I prefer to wear male clothing, so I
Mhm.
could do that there.
Mhm.
I could wear ties, I could wear bow ties. Um, my gender expression I've never really faltered with. Um, but the next interview I had at a corporation, I wore a suit to my interview.
Mm.
So that, yes, it's interesting how having one job where you know what it feels like to bring your full self, it kind of you kind of have that hypervigilance when you go to the next job of when it's
Right.
not right. You know,
Exactly like me, or that has to be someone else that looks like me, but that you can see your full self being able to be comfortable in that space.
Right. And that, yeah, I guess that's different for a lot of people. That's probably why it's so hard to do this work.
Mm,
You could do the diversity part, but the inclusion and equity, I
mm,
think that's where people are. And a lot of companies waste all this time trying to figure it out. And I've always noticed, I'm like, you're more concerned with looking like you're inclusive. You know, you're going to spend more energy trying to look like, hey, we cool over here, but you're not really.
mhm,
But that's the way I feel about it. The default is to see all the white dudes. Even me, when I look at companies I'm interested in, I was like, nah, I ain't working here. But then when I go to a company, I'm like, oh, okay, okay. You scroll, you're like, okay, I see you, Judy Chin. Okay, girl. I'll be like, let me see what this company is about. Okay. Operations or HR. I want to see a VP of manufacturing.
mhm, mhm,
Okay. Okay, Mary, I see you. Okay. That's what I like. And that's what makes me happy. Like, and it starts there. Is this place inclusive? Do I see myself there? It starts with the candidate interaction experience.
mhm.
Like know where your company is at.
Right. Mhm.
Like know where your company is at.
Right, right.
You know?
I mean, I bet with your experience, you can tell when it's just performative, like when it's just a storyline about wanting to bring in more Black people and people of color to change the face of the company.
Right. A quick review of your people, and I can see that's not true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and given the issues with race in this country, it feels really hard to make workplaces truly inclusive where race is concerned.
Yeah. We all know this country has a race relations issue. It has a problem with race. It has a problem with where race stands and its foundations, and what Black people mean to this country. And it wears you down, man. It wears you down. Like when people say, "Oh, certain people, they're always talking about what happened, and they just make racism sound so bad, or they complain too much about it or whatnot." I'm like, I don't think you get like, you know,
Yeah. And to your point, there's often this message of just get over it.
right?
You don't just erase that.
No, no. I mean, that's how. I mean, it's how the way things make you feel and your interactions with them is how you learn.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So to tell someone to get over it, it just seems kind of it's not it's not something that's in your head, it's in your body. You can't tell people to get over something that happens to them that is about their actual being,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
It's very rude to do that. I think maybe having to deal with the past is one of the reasons why, you know, this country can't give credence to the pain of Black Americans or Native Americans, you know?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's just that yeah. There's only so much trauma a body and a person can take.
Right. And yeah, and I just think I'm at the place where, yeah, I'm just not into this band right now. I think we're gonna go outside in the parking lot, smoke a doobie. Well, we'll be back, man. On in 2 hours.
Like America needs an intermission.
Yes. And that's just the way I have to look at it. It's like, it's like is how much can the people scream that this is occurring in our country, and then it hits like a wave, and people are like, oh, I didn't pack a bathing suit. I ain't know this. Did nobody tell me we was having no waves coming up in here? Oh man, I'm wearing corduroy. This is horrible. I can't feel sorry for those people. I'm just like, child, you knew it was a beach day. It's like and if I think about how those people are thinking, then it upsets me.
Mm.
It's the people that say, this is not my country. I want to be like, ma'am, are you new here? Did you just get off the Greyhound? This is not my country. Girl, you must have been quarantining for the past 25 years then. Because this is exactly who she is. Yep. No makeup, nothing. No filters. Here she is. hmm The last season of America, no filter. Ain't she a mess though? She's such a mess. And she wants somebody to help her. She wants somebody to do an intervention with her. She wants somebody to help her. But ain't nobody trying to directly help her.
Mm.
Poor Amy. You in danger, girl. Poemi.
Thanks for listening to United States of Race. This podcast was produced by me, your host, DB Crema, and our artwork is designed by Alley Creative. Love great storytelling? Go ahead and subscribe to United States of Race on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And show us some love by rating and writing a review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. You see, podchaser.com is the world's most comprehensive podcast database. So rating and writing a review there helps us get the message out and helps other listeners discover this amazing show. And you can also share this podcast with your friends and anyone who believes in the power of building connection through sharing personal stories. You can also follow us on Instagram at all one word, United States of Race. If you, yes you, have a compelling story to share and would like to be featured on an upcoming episode, send us a message at unitedstatesofrace@gmail.com. Until next time.